some of the literature review. You can text and get the slides, and you'll have all the resources on there. I'm not going to go through all those. And these are some of the organizations that we've studied in the observational study that I'm going to speak about today. So that's really the research base and the research foundation for what I'm going to show. So there's no, the point of this is we studied all these different organizations. They have very different cultures from each other. They're not the same as each other, and that's not the point of what we're going to talk about here. You don't have to, there's not like, oh, here are the 7 cultural tenets that you need to have if you want to have an innovative organization, right? That's not the case. It's just critical to be intentional about it, right? So I want to ask you to think about your own current culture in your district, and like what is it currently, and what would be your aspirational culture in your district. I'm talking about culture. You can have climate or morale where things are tense, but you can have a thriving culture, actually. So there's some things to think about with that, but I just want you, we're talking about culture, it's a way of life, it's a different kind of animal than that. So you're kind of trying to describe it. That's what you're doing with saying, here's our current and here's our aspirational, all right? So here are the 5 conclusions from that research base, from our culture study basically, that we're going to share with you. 5 conclusions about culture and the change management theory that we're going to share with you. So one is, change in education requires a culture-based solution. Adaptive or culture-based. Okay? That's one conclusion. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is. Leaders influence culture either by default or design. So you're always influencing the culture as a leader. If you're intentional about it or not, you're always influencing the culture. So that's why it's important to understand how that works, because you are doing it. And so it's either by default or design, and hopefully by the end of today, we'll be thinking about it more by design. And so that's also why it's really important to know your why. So we started with your why, because when you're really trying to model and do what you need to do in a culture, it has to be coming from an authentic place. So leaders influence by either default or design. There are 5 levers that impact organizational culture, especially when we talk about scale and sustainability. So you can impact it for a brief period of time, but if you want to take something to scale and you want to make sure it's sustainable, these levers have to be in place. And then we won't get to talk about this much today, but there are 3 leadership skills that leaders can utilize to make sure that you're creating basically the culture that you want. And then the last one is that leaders of organizations with high performance culture, they do something really important. They align their systems and their strategy and their behaviors to their vision and their beliefs. And so we're going to get to that, but that alignment piece is really important, being intentional about making that alignment piece happen.